So guys, I just wanted to get together and talk about a condition that I've had for quite a long time, in the hope that if anybody else has been diagnosed with this or is experiencing symptoms that doesn't yet have an answer diagnosis wise, then hopefully it can be of some help. So the condition I was diagnosed with is Crohn's disease. Now, Crohn's disease is a long-term condition where inflammation affects the gut area. The exact cause of Crohn's disease is unknown. Nobody knows if it's genetics. No one knows if it's like a food that can trigger something over a long period of time. And the main treatment for having Crohn's is medications. In worst case scenarios, you're required to have surgery. Now, I just wanted to share my experience. Obviously, this is completely my experience. Everybody is different, and the medications I've taken may be right for me but obviously haven't been for somebody else. So every case of Crohn's or ulcerative colitis is completely different. It is a lifelong condition and there's lots of different medications that can be used to treat it. You become very unwell. It's basically an immune system attacking disease and you can just feel like a bag of crap. So just to talk a little bit about my experience with it, I was 24 when I was diagnosed. As you can imagine, a girl in her 20s, 24, kind of, you know, out partying, out dating at university. It wasn't the ideal situation to be diagnosed with. My experience in terms of symptoms, like going right back to kind of when I remember experiencing symptoms, was probably when I was a kid, having severe cramping in my stomach and being like on the toilet, like rolled over into like a ball, and just like crying to my mum and dad saying like, I'm in so much pain, I've got such a bad stomach ache. And obviously most of the time, because it was so infrequent, like the time gaps between as and when that would happen, it would maybe happen in like, I don't know, December for example, and then wouldn't happen again for like another 9 months. So because it wasn't an everyday or a weekly occurrence, we just kind of put it down to like food, or which is kind of what everybody would do, right? You're experiencing some sort of cramping, oh, you must have eaten something dodgy. And then I remember as I got a little bit older, I was probably like 18, 19. I remember living in Australia at the time, and again it happened when I was at my mum and dad's house, and I was like in so much pain, I was in agony, and I remember walking into their room like crying. I just kind of climbed into bed and they were like, just, there's something not right here. But again, it hadn't happened for many months before, so again I just kind of put it down to, okay, maybe I've eaten something bad and it's just affected me like that. And then yeah, when I went to university, again the symptoms were happening more and more and more. I did music at university, and I remember I was going to an audition for this like 4-part harmony group, which was kind of like my dream. I love doing harmonies and that's kind of like my thing. And I went to the first round of auditions, which was great, it was in London, and then the second round of auditions was in Brighton, which is where I was actually at university for. And I don't know again if this is like stress. They do say stress can be a massive factor in a flare-up potentially. So I think somebody with an immune suppressant attacking disease, it's probably heightened. And yeah, I had the audition to go to, and I just remember all night, the night before, I was up and I was being sick and I was just feeling really, really unwell. So just to touch base on my symptoms, a lot of people struggle to keep anything in the other way. Maybe a bit TMI for some people, but yeah, just constantly having the shits and not able to keep anything in. Whereas mine was the complete opposite way. Mine was throwing up. I couldn't keep anything down, and that would happen for like a 72, 48 hour kind of period. It's kind of like every 20 minutes that you're throwing up. So as you can imagine, when you throw up anyway, you become in that kind of like shaky mode and you're like sweating but you're freezing, and that kind of like fever feeling. I think to a lot of people, when I would say that I've been like really ill all night, a lot of people, I felt, because I didn't know that I had something actually diagnosably wrong with me, I'm not sure that's a word, but because I didn't have anything concrete told to me, oh, you've got this, I never really was able to explain it other than I don't feel very well. And I think a lot of people took that as like, you're probably lying, or you're hungover, or, you know, a typical 24-year-old kind of out drinking at uni. A lot of people just expected me to be making it up. So yeah, it was at that point I decided to start pushing for some tests from the doctors, and I had like my bloods done, I had a stool sample done. Yeah, that got sent off for testing, and it came back with inflammation in my stool, which meant there was obviously inflammation in my gut area. Crohn's and colitis can affect anywhere from like your colon to your rectum, so it's quite a nasty disease to have. Anyway, the testing had been done and they wanted to send me off for further tests at the hospital, which gave me such anxiety. And I went to the hospital and they wanted to do, so they've got 2 tests that they can do. It's called an endoscopy, which I think is the camera up your bum. Then there's a colonoscopy, which I think is the camera down the throat. I'm sorry if I've got that the wrong way around, but I'm taking the end word from endoscopy is probably up your end. So yeah, a camera basically goes down your throat and up you into your gut, and to see exactly where the inflammation is, so they can obviously give you a diagnosis. They can also see in that if you've got any like tears around your colon, which is what came back on mine. I had tears on my colon, there was a lot of inflammation, and I think like a normal reading for inflammation in like a stool test is like up to 60, and I think mine was at like 500 and something. So it was quite a high amount of inflammation, and I definitely felt it symptomatically because I was ill and I was being sick and I felt like crap. So yeah, from that point I was diagnosed with it, and I remember asking the doctor, like with my mum in there, I was like crying. And I think the word disease at the end of anything gives anyone a bit of a panic. I just remember genuinely being absolutely devastated, but also quite concerned because I didn't know what Crohn's was. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand where it had come from. Why have I got it? What have I done to get this? And a bit of self-blame, I guess, is kind of put on yourself because, well, you know, if I hadn't have eaten this or I hadn't have drunk this, then it wouldn't be that. And that was just due to my lack of understanding. That's not the case. There's nothing to prove that a certain food gives you Crohn's. Like, there's nothing scientifically proven. So yeah, I remember saying to the doctor, like, am I dying? Am I gonna die? And obviously she was like reassuring me and just kind of basically explaining what it was. I was actually quite relieved to just get a diagnosis because I felt so bad for so long. So yeah, I remember being in that hospital room, my mum crying because I was crying and I was just in so much fear. And I also think from my mum's perspective, she didn't know what Crohn's was because it was so unheard of. There's nothing you specifically can do to give yourself Crohn's disease. It just, I think it's just kind of luck of the draw. In terms of like side effects, it robs you of your iron, so you're tired. You can have really bad sickness, you can have really embarrassing situations that are happening when you're out and about. For example, if you do have accidents, you have to kind of take like an extra pair of underwear out with you just in case. You can get sore eyes, hair loss, there can be like skin rashes. You can get really sore joints, that can be really painful. Blood in your stool, severe fatigue, weight loss, and of course in my case it was awful stomach pain. So yeah, that's kind of been my experiences. So in terms of actual flare-ups, there's 2 things that people will often say when they have Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, and that is a remission state or a flare. Remission means that you're well, the condition's under control, it's either being treated by medication or whatever other methods that you're being advised to do by your GP or your hospital. That means it's working for you, and that's great. A flare-up means that you've had a flare, the inflammation's kind of triggered, something's triggered it, you're feeling unwell, there's hospitalization, you're back on meds, you're moved on to stronger meds. It could be a variation of things. My first instance of hospitalization was the pain was so severe, and obviously I'm throwing up so I can't keep any tablets down, was a trip to the hospital. It was a call to 999, it was actually a call to 111, and they advised an ambulance to be sent to me for some morphine to be administered, which is obviously through a drip in a cannula. And I can honestly say it's the best relief I've ever had, because you're so tired by this point. You've been up for, you know, 48 hours of interrupted sleep, you're sweating, the fevers, you're sick, you're in pain, you're just wanting to lie in a dark room with nothing on, complete silence, and I've never experienced a pain quite like it. And I actually wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. It's a really awful time to experience. I can only hope that it's prepping me for labour if I'm lucky enough to ever have children. And I say prepping because it probably isn't a scratch on labour, and it's very much about managing your condition. There are going to be periods where you're ill and there are going to be periods where you're fine. So in terms of the hospitalisation, it was from that point that they kind of said, we need to put you on some medications. A different variation of medications will be offered to you. I take a Pentasa sachet every day. I was put on mercaptopurine, which is actually a chemotherapy medication, so again that comes with so many side effects that you take every day. And then that, it was definitely helping, but I still had a flare up. like a few weeks later and I was back in hospital. It was that point they wanted to put me onto steroids. I've read up so much on steroids and I was so against going on them. I, for one, as a girl in her 20s, did not want to be putting on weight. So yeah, I was so against steroids, and again, they come with so many more side effects, which I'm sure each steroid has different side effects. I've never taken them. And I remember saying to the doctor at hospital, I don't want to be put on steroids. And he was like, my nurse who normally deals with me at the hospital wasn't actually working on that shift. And he rang her up and he said, I don't know what you've told her about steroids. I remember hearing him in the corridor. I don't know what you've told her about steroids, but she's not wanting to take them. So I was then put on a drug called infliximab, which is a treatment that you have every 6 weeks. You have to have your bloods monitored every 2 weeks, so you have to go to the doctors and have your bloods monitored, because again, it's another really strong medication. And infliximab is administered by a cannula, so that would be put into your arm or to your hand, and you have to go to the hospital, and it's kind of like a 2-hour procedure. It was at that point they said the infliximab should really get me in a remission state, which is I'm well, I'm happy, I can go about my daily life without it being affected too much, which was great. So the infliximab was working, and then once my treatment of infliximab stopped, I would continue with my mercaptopurine and my pentasa, because the mercaptopurine would then be able to keep it at bay. Now infliximab has really kind of knocked it on its head. For me, it worked. It put me in a remission state, and I was taking mercaptopurine probably for a further year or two. And then about 2 years ago, I've been really well. I've been really happy, and my body was fine, and I was able to exercise, and I was eating my fruit and veg without it flaring up and creating something, you know, disastrous happen in terms of a flare. I was fine, and I decided to come off the mercaptopurine to give my body a break, because, you know, taking something for so long, you become immune to it, and I didn't want to become immune to mercaptopurine, so it didn't work for me. So then I had to be put on something different or something stronger, and that was completely my decision. I spoke with my nurses about it, and they kind of advised, you're never going to really know if it's the medication that's keeping this at bay or if you're genuinely healthier now, without doing like actual internal kind of examinations to figure out if the tears and everything are gone. But infliximab is a drug that can heal tears within your colon. That's the idea, and I definitely felt like it did that, because the vomiting had stopped, the cramping had stopped. But I kind of wanted to figure out, well, is it the drugs that's keeping it at bay now, or did the infliximab heal the tears in my colon, and now I don't need to take mercaptopurine because the tears have gone? So I kind of tested that out myself, and that was completely my choice. I gave my body a break for about 2 years, and then it's only been probably in the last 3 or 4 months I've started flaring up again. I've had 2 bad flare-ups, one where I've been hospitalized and one where it's been a vomiting episode that I've managed with some like codeine and paracetamol at home. I'm currently at the state now where I'm probably going to need to go on to some form of treatment, and I'm okay with that because I've given my body a break and I'm starting to feel unwell and I need to listen to my body. A lot of people say that Crohn's is IBS, or IBS and Crohn's are the same thing. I can absolutely categorically tell you that IBS and Crohn's are not the same in any way, shape or form. So I've actually been wanting to do this video for a long time, and I wanted to put a poll out on my Instagram to see if anybody had any questions. It's so great that it's becoming more spoken about, and it's definitely something I want to speak about more on my channel. I will try and answer them as best as I possibly can. Obviously, I'm not a medical professional. All I can talk about is my experience. So the first one is, do you have to go to the doctors frequently for checkups? You do if you're on certain types of medications. If I was on some type of medication like infliximab, then yeah, there would be regular checkups required. But again, I think this kind of varies for everyone differently. What lifestyle changes did you have to make when you were diagnosed? Lifestyle changes, I would probably just say, as a 20-year-old, I mean, anybody experiences a bad stomach when you have like a night on the drink. I definitely felt like I veered more away from the nights out and the bad eating, and I would try and be a little bit more healthier in my food choices. In terms of lifestyle, like going out and socializing, it wouldn't really affect me because again, mine was a vomiting episode, right? So I wouldn't necessarily need to take a change of clothes and things with me. How did you feel when you found out? I was devastated when I found out. I was heartbroken and I was petrified, is probably the biggest feeling I can remember. I was so scared, and I remember feeling like I was gonna die. I specifically remember asking that question to the nurse, and I said, I'm dying, aren't I? Like, I'm gonna die. Like I say, the medications that I do take, some of them are chemotherapy medications, so it's definitely given me like a heightened state of anxiety about getting things like cancer. Nobody wants to take something that's going to higher their chance of that. So what was the process of getting a diagnosis? So the process was going to the doctors. The doctors then sent off a blood and stool sample, and then I had an endoscopy and a colonoscopy at the hospital. And I also have an MRI, which I forgot to mention. An MRI is like when you go into this massive machine, you get given headphones. You have to drink like 1.5 liters of this like liquid that basically gives you diarrhea. It clears everything out in your stomach. You have to sit in the hospital like waiting to drink this horrible drink. It's absolutely vile. But it basically creates a liquid in your stomach that highlights things that they can see to figure out what it is that's wrong. And I actually have to go in for an MRI in about a month's time, which I've not had one in years. And again, that whole process just gives me anxiety because I get quite claustrophobic. I don't like being in enclosed spaces, and I don't like the hospital. So those two combined are like my worst thing. But so how long have you had Crohn's? I've had Crohn's since diagnosis, which was 2014. However, I think I've had it probably for like 15-20 years, if I'm completely honest. That's not medically proven, but I remember experiencing similar symptoms and being sick and having the pain, but it was just way more infrequent. Did it affect you much growing up? It definitely affected my confidence because I always experienced bloating around my bottom half of my stomach. But I do remember saying to my nurse, like, I've always got like a bulge on the bottom half of my stomach and it's doing my head in, like, is it Crohn's related or is it just me? And she's like, so many people have that with Crohn's. You will just have inflammation, bloating around that area. That is just part of it. So yeah, I definitely think that affected my confidence growing up, or affected me growing up in some sort of way. But other than that, I've just tried to take it day by day and not let it affect me. There's been times where I've had flare-ups and I've had something arranged the day after, and I'm like determined to not let that flare-up affect me, even though I don't feel 100%. I'm probably pushing my body and I should be lying in and just relaxing. I'm like, no, I've had this plan for ages. I'm not gonna let my Crohn's affect me, but that's not advice I would give anyone. Yeah, there's definitely been times where Crohn's has controlled that and I've been like, I can't. Like I physically can't. So it's affected it in that way. Can you give us a breakdown of what Crohn's is, please? Now, obviously I'm not a medical professional, but Crohn's is basically a long-term condition where the gut becomes inflamed. It's something that you need to manage. It's a lifelong condition. It doesn't just disappear. You have it forever. It's managed by different medications. And again, that's going to completely vary person to person. Do certain foods help? I remember speaking to my nurse at the hospital. She told me to keep like a food diary. A food diary is a really good way of figuring out if anything's kind of triggered it. I kept a food diary for about a week or two, and she couldn't believe how much fruit and how much vegetables and like fish I was eating, because a lot of times I think people with Crohn's that have a lot of fruit, it can really affect them negatively, whereas for me I didn't feel like it did. So there's natural anti-inflammatory foods that you can take that, you know, might help, which is like avocados, berries, broccoli, fatty fishes. Those things could help, but when I was having a flare I would ask, okay, well, can't I just eat all of this stuff and I'll be better, naively. That stuff isn't gonna just completely fix your condition, but that alongside medication may really, really help. It's definitely foods to consider incorporating into your diet. Do you have to have a bag, a colostomy bag? Crohn's is very much an invisible disease until I think you have a bag. If I have to embrace it one day, then that's just a route I have to go down. And like I say, I think in my 20s, if somebody had told me that I was going to have that, I would have feared that I never would have found a relationship or someone to support me. I feel like if it happened to me now, I'm lucky enough to be in a relationship where Sean would support me no matter what, and he would have my back and that wouldn't faze him. And if anything, he'd probably make some really awful, crude dad jokes about it to try and make me laugh. If I do have to have a bag, I'll embrace it, but at the moment I haven't had to have one. Do you think it's changed your life at all? Yeah, I think it's given me an appreciation for just having good health, massively. It's given me some sort of anxiety for hospital trips, for sure, but it's actually given me more food for thought in terms of when I want to have a child, because obviously that's definitely something I'm thinking about more now I'm in my 30s, and not just because I'm in my 30s, but I'm just getting that more maternal kind of gut feeling, like I'm starting to feel like, okay, that's something I want to explore in the next few years. So for me it's, okay, well, how does my Crohn's affect that? If I'm having a flare-up and I'm taking these medications, can I get pregnant? It's definitely affected me in the way I think, but it's not affected me in terms of the things I've done. I've not let it affect me in the things I've done. I went to Thailand, where you're renowned for getting deli belly, and I didn't let it stop me going over there and having that experience of travelling. It's easy for me to go, oh, but don't let it affect your life. But however, if somebody's laying in a hospital bed and with Crohn's because they're so ill that they can't leave, then you know, you can't be sitting there saying that. I think it's just affected the way I think about things, and that is, don't take anything for granted. What is it, and is it genetic? Well, I've kind of already explained what it is, but they haven't proved if it's genetic. There's been conversations around that it could be genetically passed down, but my mum and dad don't have it. None of my grandparents either on my mum and dad's side didn't have it. But again, was it something that was even known about back then? Probably not. I think it's kind of like a newer disease. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I certainly didn't know what it was up until my diagnosis, and it's only been recently that I've started seeing more people come out and talk about it. I think a lot of people assume that it's like an old person's disease. Actually no, like a lot of 20-30-year-old healthy people have Crohn's or has ulcerative colitis. But what advice can you give to help somebody support them with it? My advice would be listen to your body, and if you're experiencing anything, then go get it checked out. Also speak to your family and friends about it. It's an embarrassing thing to talk about, isn't it? Like, oh hi, you know, I can't keep anything in that end or that end, and it's, you know, not your ideal first date kind of topic. However, I think by speaking about it, it helps you understand your condition more. I definitely had a lot of anxiety about what it was and how it was going to affect me, and luckily I've got a really good support network. I think, yeah, my advice would be just make sure you're speaking to somebody about it and making sure that you're going to the doctors and getting things checked up if something doesn't seem right. Can it be cured? No, there's no cure for it. It is something that you just have to live with, kind of get on with, basically. Well, I think that is everything. I think I've covered everything. If you have any questions about something that I might have missed, which I probably did miss, then please leave it in the comments below. I really hope you guys have got something out of this video, whether that be that you didn't know what Crohn's was and now you kind of have a better understanding. Hope you've all enjoyed this kind of informal chit chat about my experience. But yeah, that is it for today, guys. Thank you for watching, and I hope you've all enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video very, very soon. Bye.